What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some exciting news, I suppose, in the sense that it looks like Owlcat Games is gearing up to announce yet another title, more than likely at Summer Games Fest here in just a few days, and more on that in a moment. But it's especially noteworthy because just recently, during Skulls Week for Warhammer 40k, they announced more DLC for Rogue Trader alongside the upcoming release of Dark Heresy at some point, though that one's probably a little farther off, obviously, given that we have no release date for it. But I want to preface this by saying I am of the opinion that this is more than likely going to be the upcoming new IP being made in Unreal Engine that they mentioned in, I believe it was a Reddit AMA a while back. Mostly because the short teaser that I'm bringing you this information from doesn't really give me anything concrete from other franchises that isn't a little vague, or they likely would have simply announced elsewhere recently. But let's start with that teaser and talk about some of that stuff before I start explaining my thought process here. Essentially, yesterday Owlcat dropped a quick Twitch stream, more or less, of a vague signal, as they described it, of some sort of distress signal coming from what appears to be an asteroid, of a man claiming to have information about something that sounds like Osiris, and that somebody else named like Zabar or Zalbar will be able to vouch for him, and that he's going to send his coordinates to be picked up with this information.
Hi, I know who you messed with. I have information about Osiris, and to prove you must get me out of here. Zabar will bow out for sending my coordinates.
More on the specifics of that message in just a moment, because one thing you'll also notice is that there is a flashing light coming from this asteroid in this teaser that appeared to be Morse code, and upon translating that, you get redirected to a website where we are met with a countdown timer, which seems to coincide with Summer Games Fest here in just a few days. Meaning that whatever this winds up being, it looks like we'll be finding out pretty quickly. But a couple of notes just straight away. Obviously, just the sort of UI and look of this website is fairly clean, and given the rest of the teaser's nature, which seems to do with space and the like, it seems to be something in the realm of sci-fi. But what is the reasoning behind why I think this is actually going to be that new IP that they've mentioned working on? Well, simply put, nothing else seems to line up initially, because also in the past AMAs, they've already explained that they're not currently working on anything like Pathfinder or Starfinder at that time, and so it seems unlikely that they would then have a reveal for those things. And to even drive that point further home, you may have missed it because it kind of flew under the radar, but PaizoCon was relatively recent, and I imagine, given that they released gameplay of the upcoming Pathfinder Abomination Vaults from Become Studios at that event recently, if they were going to announce something related to Paizo, it probably would have happened there. It's possible, technically, that they could have saved it for Summer Games Fest to attract a larger audience, but the fact that they didn't, and then combined with the statements that they're not even working on it, I just don't see how this could realistically be Starfinder or Pathfinder. Now, with that said, the little distress beacon that they put out does mention Osiris. That brings to mind a few different things. For starters, there's a deity in Starfinder called Osiris, so, fair enough on that one. But given that the signal here says that he has information on Osiris, I don't think that would even line up anyway. Another thing that may come to mind is Warhammer 40k's, I think it's like Osiris Rebellion, something like that, where the Ultramarines fought off some sort of only half-corporeal Xenos race known loosely as the Cybirds. Now, the thing there is, again, recently they announced Warhammer stuff at the Skulls event, so if this was another thing in that universe, you would have assumed they would have announced this there as well. So from there, let's talk about other franchises that Owlcat Games has not worked on. Well, you see, towards the end of the distress signal, they say something like Zabar or Zalbar, and you might initially think of the world from Babylon 5, but in the context in which it's said here, it sounds like Zabar or Zalbar is a person, not a world. And that's a pretty loose connection anyway, so I don't entirely believe it, frankly. Now, one theory that I actually do think it could theoretically be is the Expanse. So the Expanse does have a TTRPG released relatively recently back in 2019, and in fact, that series did actually have a ship called the Osiris, and so having information on it would have made sense here, but as part of that TV series, that ship was destroyed, so it doesn't exactly fully line up either, but it does seem to at least appear to be slightly more likely than the other things I've heard. So for me at least, I still think it is going to be a brand new IP. Just all of the signs and signals here seem to point that direction. I have no point of reference for anything this could be otherwise, so while I would not go so far as to rule out that it couldn't be, an existing IP, we know they're working on a new IP, and this really does kind of seem like it's probably it. At least to me, at least. Obviously, feel free to throw your own theories down there as well. Now, if it is, in fact, a new IP, it would presumably be something slightly different from a CRPG, which we've known to expect from Owlcat to some degree, and that they're clearly still working on. So in that sense, it would be a pretty new direction that would certainly come with its own twists and surprises, with the good news there being that they are also continuing to work on CRPGs, which I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate, because what tends to happen is studios get popular for making CRPGs only to, in order to continue that growth, shift away from that into, let's say, more popular genres as it tends to go, and suddenly they are not making CRPGs anymore, or at least isometric type ones that we associate with Owlcat and the like. But the other side of that simply being that Owlcat really seems to be ramping up pretty quickly with all these different teams working on these different projects either way, because even if this is an existing IP, they've got a lot going on, frankly. And that is almost where I want to end the video, because, frankly, I have one more piece of information that I'm going to be a little vague with, but just isn't quite lining up. So, while I do not, in fact, know anything that you guys don't know, I am signed up to Owlcat's sort of content creator partner program, which is typically the avenue through which they distribute early access to keys and stuff, review copies, that kind of thing. And I'm being a little vague here because, it might honestly just mean nothing, I suppose. But they described all of the recent announcements with a word that I have yet to place with any of the announcements they've actually made so far. That is to say, the Rogue Trader DLC, the Dark Heresy announcement, or this particular announcement that they're obviously teasing here. But realistically, if they weren't to announce it here, I don't know where else they would announce it either. And to be fair, we haven't seen the full trailer and everything for this announcement, so it's possible it's just part of this. But a descriptor was used that I have yet to apply to anything I have seen them announce over the last couple of weeks. So essentially, I'm still trying to put the pieces together here, but something's not quite adding up here, is what I guess I'm getting at. And I don't want to send people into a frenzy over it until I have more information myself. But either way, while I was always going to, of course, cover the Summer Games Fest announcements later this week on Saturday, I believe, it looks like we'll have more to talk about in terms of what Owlcat specifically is doing, and I'm looking forward to covering that, as they are certainly making some of my favorite games as of late. But as for this moment, that's pretty much all there is to say. In the meantime, while we wait, I'd love to hear your guys' theories or anything you'd like to add or speculate upon. By all means, drop it down in the comments section below, which of course means to comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.